So episode 3 is finally here and we need to break it down, so let's get straight into it. We begin the episode on Brendok 16 years before and we see Osha admiring the local fauna and demonstrating her force abilities. May interrupts Osha's alone time and there's an interesting detail where we see May also use the force to hold the flying creature in place. But unlike Osha, she uses two hands in the way the witches would have taught them. Whereas Osha uses the force almost like how the Jedi would, a more casual use of a single hand, which really does set the two apart, with May being more committed to the coven than Osha. You could potentially also say that the fact that May has to use two hands to hold down the creature while Osha only uses one might suggest that Osha is the more powerful of the two. We learn from May that Osha is sitting under a Bunta tree, which is of course used earlier as a poison to kill Master Torbin. We learn that Osha is dreading something called the Ascension, and we hear the two of them recite their childhood saying. The two are found by Mother Koril, who tells them that they should not be out here. Mother Koril is of course a Zabrak, the same species as Darth Maul, and in the distance we see Sol is spying on them. The twins return to the settlement of witches, where we are then introduced to Mother Aneseya, the leader of the coven. Koril and Aneseya discuss the Jedi sightings and the twins, and Koril says that the twins are not normal children, which I initially thought simply referred to the fact that they could use the Force, but as we learn later, it's a whole lot more than that. We are then introduced to how the coven perceive the Force, something which they call a thread. Mother Aneseya goes on to say that some people call it the Force and claim to use it, which subtly references the Jedi, and she then goes on to say that the Force or thread is not a power you wield, instead it is something that binds you to others. And while Mother Aneseya clearly means it as a rejection of the Jedi way, in many ways what she is saying also closely mirrors Yoda's teachings on Dagobah.
Its energy surrounds us and binds us. Luminous beings are we, not this crude matter.
Aneseya provides a demonstration and commands them to block her as she pushes them with the Force, and notice how May immediately assumes a defensive position while Osha chooses to step behind her sister. It's an interesting dynamic and important detail that will be crucial later on. The training is interrupted when the mothers sense something, and notice how Mother Koril immediately looks at this device that seems to be charged with electricity, the same device that seemingly explodes in later scenes. Osha and May get ready and Osha refuses to let May see her book. And as Osha asks May if she wonders what else could be out there, May tells her no. And this is really just a reminder of how different the two are, their diverging personalities, and to that extent the different journeys they will embark on. There is also a moment where the twins mention that they are the only children around, and we see the two witches doing their hair just sort of glancing at each other momentarily. It really just adds to the mystery of the whole situation. As the Ascension ceremony gets underway, we learn that these witches are in supposed exile and persecuted by what seems to be alluded to as the Jedi. Aneseya then talks about the miracle of life, referring to the birth of the twins, but as we see later, this might not very well be a miracle but an orchestrated event. In the background, we see two planets crossing over each other and a thin line intersecting them, representing the thread. And as the ritual continues, you can see Mother Aneseya collecting the power of the witches, which translates into this purplish glow. May takes the oath and the symbol that we see in her older version appears on her forehead. Osha is then about to take the oath when they are then interrupted by the Jedi. Mother Aneseya tells them to set aside their weapons, and as we see the Jedi walk in, it kinda feels as though they are strangers. There is this uneasy, suspicious feeling that comes along when seeing the Jedi from the perspectives of the witches. Indara tells the witches that they did not realize the planet was uninhabited, and Aneseya makes fun of them by sarcastically remarking that the all-knowing Jedi are unaware of their surroundings, which is a callback to a very common Jedi teaching of being aware of said surroundings. Osha regards the Jedi with curiosity and wonder, while May is more distrustful. We then learn that the Jedi are here to investigate the possibility of Force orders outside the Jedi training children, something which is prohibited by Republic law. And this is a pretty interesting piece of information as it does shed light on the idea that the Jedi do really have a monopoly on using the Force in the galaxy at this point in time. The fact that other Force orders are not permitted to train Force-sensitive children in essence also also means that they are not allowed to recruit new members, hence leading to the potential extinction. It's a rather questionable law that really helps put others' views of the Jedi Order into perspective. Osha ends up stepping forward and Sol meets her for the first time, and you can tell that the witches are not happy that the Jedi have found the twins. As we see Sol interact with Osha for the first time, we also get the sense of the alluring power of the Jedi, how they're able to attract people, and a lot of this not only has to do with how they look, but also the way they use pieces of their organization, like robes and lightsabers in particular, to project this soft power. Sol recognizes that May has a mark on her forehead that wasn't there earlier, and the witches immediately accuse them of spying, wanting to steal their children. Something which Sol denies, which is technically true as the Jedi can only offer to take Force-sensitive children for training and not actually force them. Sol offers Osha the opportunity to be tested as a Jedi, and Mother Aneseya then uses her powers to momentarily take control of Torbin, who at this point in time is the weakest of the bunch. And we can finally see why the Jedi might perceive these witches to use the dark side of the Force, as it is a rather grim thing to enter someone's mind and render them immobile. Aneseya finally lets Torbin go and promises to let both girls be tested. As the witch deliberate over what to do, the witches find their hands tied as they recognize that they can't quite stand up against the Jedi. Koril and Aneseya disagree over what they must do, and we then learn that it was Koril that carried the twins to term, while it was Aneseya who created them, which is kind of a crazy idea because this actually references a long-standing theory about the way Anakin was created. You see, much like the twins, Anakin was also conceived without a father, which was intended to be as a way of demonstrating that Anakin was conceived by the Force as the chosen one.
Who was his father?
There was no father.
And so the long-standing theory was that it was Darth Plagueis who used the dark side of the Force to create Anakin, while Shmi Skywalker carried him to term. So it's interesting that the show is now using this theory and bringing it in as a plot point. Just to be clear, this doesn't necessarily mean that Anakin 2 was created, but it does lend to the possibility that a Sith could also discover a way to do it and replicate it with Anakin. There is also a brief allusion to the cost of this dark creation, but before we can get any more details, an elder witch advises them to get the girls to fail, thereby preventing the Jedi from taking them away, which is a rather sound tactic. Aneseya talks to the twins, and as they debate over what each of them will do, Aneseya speaks about how this is more about power than good or bad, which again reinforces the idea that it is the Jedi who determine who gets what, an inherent inequality that most non-Jedi Force orders will likely be unhappy about. Torbin takes Osha's blood sample in order to test her midichlorian levels, something which Qui-Gon does for Anakin. And as the test begins, we see that Osha is tasked with using the Force to guess what's on the screen, essentially the same way Anakin was tested in The Phantom Menace. Osha lies and says she sees a spaceship when it is in fact a Lothcat, which was first introduced in Rebels. Sol tricks Osha into accidentally revealing that she knows the real answer, and the Jedi quickly figure out the truth of the situation. Sol convinces Osha to follow her heart and that there are many children with the same abilities, something which she has been told otherwise by the witches. May is obviously angry by Osha's decision, but Aneseya ultimately allows Osha to make her own decision. Aneseya tells her that the witches will take into account when they make their decision, which to me sounds far from a guarantee. Osha packs her things thinking that she's going to become a Jedi, and we see from her book a drawing of a symbol of the Jedi Order, which might indicate that she has perhaps been having visions or dreams about the Jedi. May refuses to let Osha leave, telling her that she'll kill her, and she then proceeds to steal Osha's book and start a fire. It's a rather weird interaction, somewhat uncharacteristic of May, considering that she's always acted as the protective one. So for her to then pull a 360 and threaten to kill Osha just because she wants to join the Jedi tells me that something is not quite right with May, with there being a possibility that this is not actually May at all but a Sith Lord who has been watching close by. Now of course this could all just be May making a very angry mistake, but I don't think so. Osha manages to escape her room, but then comes across the device from earlier, which explodes. May tries to get Osha to come to her, but when Osha asks her where Mother Aneseya is, May tells her that the matriarch is dead. This then causes the two of them to accuse one another for being at fault, And while you can read this as Osha thinking May did something bad and May blaming it on Osha because she wanted to leave with the Jedi, I do wonder if this was intentionally done by the show, because what we see from this night is definitely far from complete. For the most part, we've seen the events unfold from Osha's perspective and not May, which leaves open the possibility that things may not appear to be what they are. On top of this, we also haven't really gotten the Jedi's perspective either. Keep in mind that May actually thinks that it was the Jedi that caused the death of her family, and so clearly there has been some manipulation going on, likely from the mysterious Sith Lord. Sol manages to save Osha but not May, who seemingly plunges to her death. On their way out, we witness the massacre of the coven, including Aneseya, and the two of them are then forced to leave. Osha awakens on board the Jedi vessel, and as Sol comforts her, we can see in the background Torbin with a series of scars on his face, the same scars that we see his older counterpart carry, confirming the idea that it was indeed the events of the night that left him that way. Sol takes pity on her and he promises to train her as his Padawan. Meanwhile, back on Brendok, we see May is alive and well as she stares at the Bunta tree. So definitely a ton of questions that need to be answered there. Anyways, that's all for this breakdown. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. I am the Lost Acolyte,
and I have spoken.